Welcome to Bob Riding's Indicator. We are this year's proud sponsor of the Herald and Review Preps. To all the players, coaches, and fans out there, we wish you a very successful season. Remember, for all your automotive needs, come see us at Bob Riding's Indicator across from Caterpillar.
Hello and welcome to week 7 of the Preps Preview. I'm Herald and Review sports writer Justin Conn. This is sports editor Mike Albright. Mike, what were some impressions you had of last week as far as the games went? A lot of big games, but
we were excited about the games.
We were excited about the games.
There were 5, 6, 7, 8 games that we couldn't wait to see happen, and it turned out a few of those went well, or close games that we were excited about. But really, it turned out to be the individual performances that really caught our attention.
Yeah, there was a ton. I mean, the one that stood out the most, obviously, was Cody Woolen of Cerro Gordo going for
378 yards in a big game against the number 9 ranked team in the state.
Right, school record, and against Tri-County, who hadn't lost a game in the LOVC in a couple of years now. So, I mean, Cody had been having a good year, but that came out of nowhere a little bit.
He had a 260-yard performance a couple weeks earlier, but on the most part, it had been kind of quiet. They were supposed to have a nice rushing team this year. Hadn't quite come about yet, but he blew that out of the water in a big way.
Right.
I believe it was the 5th biggest rushing effort by a Herald Review player of all time.
Right, and obviously a Cerro Gordo record. And Philip Meyer for Tuscola had
369 yards, I believe. Real nice passing game. But as always, it's his footwork that's just amazing that makes him the stud that really carried Tuscola to that win.
Right.
In the same game, Curtis Ramsey had 350-some yards. Real slow start in the first quarter. I don't know if he had any yards in the first quarter.
Right.
Ended up with 350 and almost led them back to make the game a good game.
And then for MacArthur, you have Brian Jennings and Devin Ingram, who have been putting up big numbers, but this was their biggest performance, I would say, as far as both over 160 yards rushing,
right.
and just those two are really developing into a pretty potent rushing attack for MacArthur.
You had Hussey, the quarterback down at Charleston, 391 yards in 3 quarters of the game. He didn't even finish that game. Donahue at Monticello. We just had a lot of big efforts, and it's exciting to see maybe these kids are breaking out now and see what they can do as postseason gets closer.
The one player who'd been putting up those numbers all year was Shavante Joyner of St. Teresa, and this was the first game with St. Teresa taking on Tolono Unity last week. The first game, he didn't do much. He only ended up with about 29 yards rushing. He had like 40 yards receiving too, but Unity really just limited him, really kept him from breaking big plays. Shavante ran hard, came out of the game with injuries a few times, ended up not being able to finish the game. But, Unity defense was impressive against Maroa. Maroa was able to kind of Tolono, really stubbed their toe so many times in that game that they gave Maroa so many chances that Maroa was eventually able to break through. Didn't quite have as many mistakes against St. Teresa, and the Bulldogs just couldn't move the ball on Tolono. I think it's pretty safe to say at this point that Tolono might have the best defense in Class 3A. You look at some of the other top 3A teams like Greenville and Sterling Newman. Those teams are giving up a ton of points. Unity is really the one team that's kind of really sticking people on defense. Of course, we can see Tolono and St. T again. Very likely. Of course, last year they played in the playoffs. If they do meet again, you have Kyle Lacrone back for St. Teresa. You think that makes a difference, Mike?
Let's hope that Kyle Lacrone gets back in time. Tolono defense, like you said, that may be the thing that sets them apart.
Yeah.
Maybe the thing that gets them back to Champaign yet again. St. Teresa is going to have to pick it up, and it looks like a lot of phases of their game right now to get back to that.
Right. This week, not quite as big as last week as far as the matchups go, but still some really good ones, including the biggest one being Maroa Forsyth traveling to Tuscola. Really, this is Maroa's first big game since the Unity game. They've had a string of blowout wins, and we've seen them trip up on the road in the blue the last 2 years. 2 years ago, they got beat bad at Tuscola, and then last year they got beat at A&M. You think they trip up on the road again this year, Mike?
I don't see it. I don't see it. I've talked to somebody close to the Maroa program this weekend. He really likes what they got. I've been saying since week 1, I don't want to jinx you, Maroa, but I think they got as good a team as they've had in a long time, maybe better than those state teams. They don't have many weaknesses there.
No, I think the difference this year, I don't know that they have the the big play weapons. Maybe
they don't have the explosive guy.
The explosive
They've got
guy.
a lot of good skill guys, not the fantastic ones.
Right, but their line play is
They're
so much
huge.
bigger. They're so much bigger and better, and that's really killed them. Late in the season, and this year I just
That's
don't see
what
it
hurt them in
happening.
Champaign
Yeah,
last year.
yeah.
They couldn't get that push that they needed in Champaign. Things turned pretty ugly pretty quickly. But with these horses,
It is hard to pick against Tuscola at home, though. I mean, they haven't lost at home in a while. So, I do think, and I'm sure there are plenty of Maroa players that still remember that game 2 years ago. Aaron Ford and Logan Stelzreedy being two of those players back from that team. And that was probably the most embarrassing Maroa loss in a long time. They got shut out at Tuscola. You just don't see Maroa get shut out.
and Maroa guys have long memories; they'll remember that. Tuscola, I'm not sure yet. I've seen them, and I've seen them again, and they keep getting it done. They put up 35 points and a half against a good Central Hand
Right.
team. That's a better team than they showed last week. Tuscola just keeps getting it done somehow. I'm not quite convinced, but Reinhardt gets them in the end zone every weekend. So.
And A&M, I think that statewide, we keep telling the rest of the state, hey, this A&M team's for real. This is a dangerous team in Class 1A. But then, right now they're sitting at 3-3. A lot of people are going, I don't know, but from my eyes as well, there's a lot of talent on that A&M team, and they gave St. Teresa a close game. They had they've had the two real bad performances against Tolono, first halves against Tolono and Tuscola now.
Yeah, I wouldn't count them out. They could be dangerous in the postseason, but they have to play 4 quarters, which they haven't done very often this year.
Right. There's some other big games this week too. Mount Zion travels to Effingham. There's some questions about if Grant Naylor is going to play. He got injured last week, and then I think Effingham has appeared to be a little bit down this year, but they do have Grant Johnson, who is just incredibly explosive.
They looked great last week in their win, and never count them out as long as Grant Johnson. I believe almost 300 yards total offense again last week. He catches ball, rushes,
Right.
Returns. He probably fetches the water. He's good. I don't know how you can stop him.
Yeah, I mean, since the first couple of games where he didn't get a ton of touches, he's just been unbelievable. And then we talked about Cerro Gordo and their big win over Tri-County last week. Kind of put themselves at 3-3 in position. If they can, win, they're going to need to win out still.
And
I
they're
believe.
tied atop the conference, though.
They are tied atop
So
the
they get
conference.
a couple wins there. Maybe they win the Little Oka and earn their way in that way.
That's true too. Villa Grove, though, is their opponent this week. I think before Friday, I think I would have, even with Cerro Gordo at 2-3, probably thought that's a win for the Broncos. But then Villa Grove goes out and beats Arcola pretty bad, and Arcola beat Cerro Gordo. So that's the LOVC right now is a little bit confusing.
Everybody was going to throw Tri-County just
Yeah.
out there is going to win it, and Cerro Gordo showed them a lot different.
Yeah, exactly. One more real big one this week is Sangamon Valley at Williamsville. Williamsville's unbeaten. They're state ranked in Class 2A. And, the Storm got a nice win last week against Pleasant Plains, but, Dan Rentschler still is not completely healthy. He's still not putting up the numbers we're used to seeing from Dan Rentschler. And, I just feel like that if they don't have – they have had a lot of players, Eric Leonard, Nick Craig, and Laney Martin, who have stepped up, with Rentschler not, being completely healthy. But to beat Williamsville, they're going to have a healthy Rentschler, I would think.
I was not a big fan of Sangamon Valley this year. I wasn't sure they got a pretty tough schedule. I wasn't sure how many players they had on their team. Wasn't sure how they were going to get it done. And like you say, Rentschler's been held back a little bit. And here they are in position to do great things. So got to give a shout out to Coach Lee for getting that job done so far.
As always, make sure you check out hrpreps.com. Blogs, make sure you check out Twitter account at hrpreps. Be finally getting rid of Mike next week, bringing in our new writer, Gareth Slager. A little more interesting, a little more exciting, so definitely tune in for that.